Hello everybody, and welcome to Cuppa with KiMar, Life in Short Sips. This is episode number 9, and today we're going to be talking about, do people choose the time that they die, or does the time we die choose us? I don't know, but I've got some interesting notes to share on some of the research that I've done, so go get yourself something delicious to drink, and I'll catch you back here in just a minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I'm from the Christian tradition, and I would say probably 90% of the people I talk to from Christianity would say that God chooses when we die. And they quote verses like Job 14:5 or in Psalm 139. There are some strong verses in there that say that God has designated how many days we're going to live. But I've always wondered, well, what about Paul? So in Philippians 1, there is a verse where Paul says, it's really good for me to be with you, but I'd really love to be with Jesus. So what should I do? Which way should I choose? And I've always wondered, from that verse, do we make a choice at some time in our lives, whether we're going to go on to the next life or we're going to stay here with the people that are in our life now? Well, I don't know, but some of the stories that I've heard that have thrown me into question about these things is like people who sit by the bedside of their loved one on their sick bed, but then they get up and they go get a cup of coffee, and while they're getting a cup of coffee, the person dies. And the nurse that was in the hospital when my husband was sick said she's seen many deaths, and most of the time, people die when their loved ones leave the room. And so it almost feels like they're choosing to leave at that time. So I had a similar story with my husband because at 2:30 we started disconnecting him from the life support systems that he was on. By 7:30, everybody in my family who didn't have belief in Jesus Christ, if that wasn't their spiritual focus, they all of a sudden had some place to go. And so the room emptied out except for 8 of us. And I looked around the room and I said, you know what? The only people left in the room now are people who believe in Jesus. Why don't we pray together? And so we started to pray, and David's sister prayed that God would help David to just make the transition from this life to that life. And within 15 minutes, he had passed. And I've often wondered, did David make that decision to pass at that time? I don't know. So as you know from some of my past videos, I love diving into what other people think about whatever the topic is at hand. So I did a little research, and I found that Buddhists feel that our day of death, our time of death, is predetermined. However, we can make choices that will have a positive or negative effect on our next life. So that's from a website called Tricycle Buddhism for Beginners, which is where I am. Then I looked into Hinduism, which also believes that our time of death is predetermined. And finally, so does the Quran, and the prophetic narrations from Islam also emphasize that death occurs when God's appointed time arrives. So I thought, well, let me dive into one more area and see what people in the psychic realm decide on this kind of an issue. I figure if they're talking to dead people, they probably have a good idea how these people died and whether it was their choice or not. So I came across an article by medium Jay Lane, and the article was called, "Do We Choose When and How We Die?" And what she says in this article is that before we come into being, we choose exactly how and when we are going to pass. We have 5 different ways to die that we have chosen according to the lessons we have come here to learn, or what part of our path we are on. So, for example, some people die quickly because they don't want their family to see them suffering. Some die more slowly because they know their family's not ready to say goodbye to them. So she was telling the story of her dad who died in his 50s, but one day he just said to his family, by the end of this month, I will die. And that's exactly what happened. So, how did he know that? And did he just know it or did he choose it? So, I think Jay would probably say he chose that time for whatever reason. So, one final bit of research that I would like to share with you comes from Richland, Washington, from an organization called the Divine Fellowship. The article was written by Janice Lynch and it's called Exit Points. And Janice Lynch caught my attention because she considers herself both a psychic and a Christian. And if you know much about Christianity, those two don't go together usually. And so I was fascinated to begin with to start reading the article. But the mission, let me share with you, the mission of the Divine Fellowship is to explore truth in all religions through the lens of Christianity. So if you happen to be in Richland, Washington, you could go check out this place and let us know what you thought. But the question she asks in this article is, what is an exit point? So let's start there. An exit point is a moment given to the soul or spirit to choose. That moment of choice can look like a near-miss accident or a serious health issue. It could be one of those experiences that leave us feeling like we were very lucky to still be alive. If you've ever had one of those, then that is one of those places she calls an exit point. Like as we're going through our life, we can choose at these exit points whether we want to move on to the next life or if we want to stay in this one. Those exit points have powerful spiritual significance, she writes. Often our destiny has been fulfilled, or we have achieved some measure of success or acceptance, or we have been stuck in a pattern from which we are ready to be released. If the soul chooses to remain in this life, then it experiences a living reincarnation. And a living reincarnation is an opportunity to be and do something new and different without having to die to have this new perspective. We reinvent ourselves in such a way that we aren't the same person at all. It's a fascinating article, and I would encourage you to go read it because I've just given you a tiny little bit of it. But it makes me think just a minute about my husband's second motorcycle accident. Every time I went to the hospital after that motorcycle accident, I could see my husband just getting better and better day by day. It was almost miraculous. And to be honest, he should have died. He was riding his motorcycle straight. Someone turned left in front of him. He hit the truck with his head that had no helmet on it. He should be dead. And so I've often wondered, with his miraculous recovery and the fact that he should have been dead, did he choose that accident? Was that one of those exit points? And he said, no, KiMar's not quite ready for me to die, which I certainly was not. And so he stayed here longer? I don't know. The other question I might have is, well, if he was able to make that choice, what about people, moms and dads who die leaving small little children behind? Certainly they would have chosen not to die at that time in their lives too. So I guess this video, I just have a ton more questions than I have any answers for. And so I would be very interested to see what kind of thoughts do you have on whether or not we choose our day of death. Whether or not there are exit points along the way. Do you have any experiences that might support something like that? I would be very curious. So put your thoughts in the comments below. And when you're ready, we can move on to episode number 10. This is KiMar with Cuppa with KiMar, Life in Short Sips.